Hey guys, welcome back to Ultimate S&S. I hope everyone is having a wonderful Monday. Just been outside doing basic stuff, getting stuff out of the garden, checking on the chickens, make sure to have feed, water, doing the quail and stuff like that as well. Basically, just kind of want to take and talk a little bit about some of the benefits of trying to become a little more sustainable. Obviously, you're going to save a lot more money on food, but you have to find a balance, especially if you're doing flock animals and things like that. Because yes, you can have eggs, an abundance of eggs, but if you're having to buy a lot of your feed, you need to find a balance of you know how much feed you're buying to how many chickens that you have. If you're having to buy a lot of feed because you have a lot of chickens and you're getting a lot of eggs, but you don't really eat eggs, then you're kind of really not having much of a benefit to your budget would be my guess. But what I've ended up doing is we started off, we ended up with somewhere around 15 chickens originally, and we're down to basically 7 now, which is 5 hens, and we have 2 roosters. The roosters are separated, and we'll keep those roosters for now. It's just a great way to create new bloodlines if you need to. But when it comes to quail, they eat a lot less food. You're going to get meat and eggs a heck of a lot quicker than you do with chickens, because chickens take about 5 months roughly to get to a size where they're even worth really butchering out. If you butcher them too soon, you're not getting a lot of weight. You've just spent a bunch of money in food for nothing, basically. So you have to find that balance. My suggestion to you, if you're planning to do chickens, they do good to be able to eliminate weeds, clean out gardens and things like that, fertilizer source and stuff as well. But they eat a lot of food. I mean, they really do, especially depending on the breeds that you have. If you're using Brahma chickens and stuff like that, they eat about twice the amount of food. They don't put out as much eggs as, say, a black Australorp. And you're going to have to run into the issue of you're spending more in feed than they're giving you back. So those are some real problems you got to look at. Same thing with gardening and stuff. If you're hooked to like city water, and depending on what the water bills and things, and then you have your sewage bills on top of that comes out with however much water you're using, it may not be as beneficial for using city water to water a garden. It is an expenditure to put in a shallow pump or a well to be able to water that, but you're going to save a lot more money, and you're going to have a lot better water going in there too, because it's not going to be chlorinated, it's not going to have fluoride and stuff like that coming from the city. So it's going to benefit your plants a lot better. There's a lot of people that say they fill up tanks and they let it sit for 48 to 72 hours to let the chlorine dissipate and stuff. Honestly, I don't know anybody who really does that. You'd have to have a really large holding tank. Then you're looking at a pretty big expenditure to fill those tanks up with city water. So maybe you can do some rain catch barrels by your gutters. That's a really good option to have. And you can just do a little small 12-volt pump with some kind of a solar setup, and you can get those at Harbor Freight. They run anywhere between $30 to $60 depending on the size that you want. And you can even buy the little solar panels that you can hook that up to, or you can just have a car battery that you can charge with solar. Totally up to you how you want to do it. The main thing that you want to do is create a lifestyle that's sustainable. So what I'm doing out here is we'll look at some of the millet that we put out. We put out 50 seeds. We've got one that looks like it has a head growing on it. The rest of them, they're growing, but they're not growing very large right now. So we should at least get enough fresh seeds from this one head when it finally comes in, and we'll go out and we'll look at that later on. It's raining today. We'll see how long it lasts. I think it's just supposed to be in the late mornings from about 10 until 1. So that will be kind of nice for our garden. We went out yesterday and we went ahead and treated the plants because I seen the rain coming in, and I wanted to open those up so they're a little airier, especially with our squash and zucchini. As you can see, they get real big and bushy, a lot of foliage. Well, that makes it harder for the bees to get in to actually pollinate. So you want to make sure you open that up, removing old growth. If you see stuff that looks kind of spotty white, that's powdery mildew is typically what that is. It doesn't matter how hot it is in your yard. They say if you give your plants at least 6 hours of daylight, you shouldn't have that. Well, down here in Florida, it's always humid, and it really tends to build up in your plants. So you want to make sure you have that opened up so the breeze can keep things dry inside. And that doesn't take very long. You just go out and prune out the older growth. You want to keep your smaller growth inside, and the bees will be able to get in, pollinate, and start really creating more food. You want to look and see if you find unpollinated little pods. that the flower came up, they didn't get pollinated. If you don't get that off your plant, they will actually rot and mold on the plant. That can actually shut your plant down, giving it diseases and stuff, and telling it's at the end of the growing season. So it's important that you get in and prune those plants as well. When you're looking at cucumbers and stuff, monitor the health of your leaves. If you're getting a lot of kind of like brown or yellow around the outside of the leaf, you probably have either not added enough fertilizer or you've added too much fertilizer. Understand there is a balance there. You want to make sure that you're not over fertilizing stuff, and watch those leaves as well. If you have one plant that gets powdery mildew, the wind will carry them spores and it will actually transfer onto all of your plants. So always make sure that you treat that. And here's some different ways you can treat that with stuff you have in your own home. If you have baking soda, you can use baking soda, and you can use water and you can mix that in. They recommend putting a little bit of vegetable oil in there as well, something about how it helps it keep it from clumping. Not really sure, but what I do is I use apple cider vinegar and water, and I'll use a 25% vinegar to 75% water ratio. Make sure that's mixed up good. Do not buy the cider vinegar that has the mothers, which is little chunks. You don't want that. It's going to plug up your spray bottle, and you just go out and mix that. You want to do that early morning or in the evening is when I would recommend doing it, because if it doesn't dry off in time during the day, it's going to actually cause burn on those leaves. And if you go too high of a ratio, the acidic mix from your vinegar is going to actually start harming your plants as well. So make sure you don't use too much. That would be my recommendation on that. And then there's actually, you can use milk. They say you want to use a 50-50 ratio or a 40-60, 40% milk, 60% water is what I would try. I've never tried it before. We might look into doing that later and see how it is. But you can put that in a spray bottle, and they say you can spray your leaves with that, and it's actually going to get rid of that as well, that powder mildew. You want to remove any affected plants or leaves that are just really like covered in that stuff. You'll make sure you cut all that out as close to the stem as you can without damaging the main stem or the main runner on your plants. And that's supposed to help. So those are some things we're going to try out in the future. I do know that the vinegar water mix works. That's always been my go-to. I try to keep apple cider vinegar in the house anyway, because if you have a dog and they have skin conditions where they get hot spots and things like that, that's really good to put on a rag and to wipe those areas, and it helps to heal their skin a lot quicker. So if you have a dog that's dealing with that type of issue, give it a try, man. It doesn't take much. It makes them smell pretty good too for a little bit. But typically what I do is I will take a already wet rag, then just add a little bit in there and just wring it around real good. And you can wipe that on your dog too, and that's going to help with those hot spots on your pups. Having an English bulldog, I've had to come up with a lot of different scenarios and stuff on how to help with that type of stuff, especially certain types of weather kicks in. Especially with this humidity is the main thing. Wrinkled up dogs, they get sweaty, they get nasty in them creases, and you got to keep them cleaned out. And if you're just wiping them with water, it's not giving it a chance to dry out. So you want to use something that's going to, not be too harsh on them, but it's going to make sure it kills any kind of bacteria that's trying to build up in that, which is where the apple cider vinegar really comes in handy. It comes in handy in the garden stuff. So I had recently, last year, I'd opened up some powder milk. I discovered I don't like powder milk. It's gross. I will go with shelf-stable milk and things like that in the future. But the powder milk, it was already past its date. It had been opened as well. It's been there a year. So I figured it was time to go ahead and figure out what to do with that. So instead of throwing that out, what you do is you want to take and make, I typically what I'll do is about 3 cups of that to a 5-gallon bucket of water. Doesn't sound like much, but it puts those nutrients back in the ground. You don't want to overdo it. If you have soured milk, make sure you strain the clumps out. You can use 2% whole milk, whatever you're using. If it's going out of date, you can strain that out. You can keep those clumps and make something with it if you want to, or just put it in your compost pile, and it's going to break down and be beneficial bacteria inside your compost, which is a really good thing to do as well. But we went out and I used that powdered milk and ended up making about 20 gallons of water with that stuff and applied it down at the bottom of the plants. That's going to help give them the calcium, the phosphates and things that they need. It really will. It's one of them things where use what you can. You want to make sure that you have as much stuff at home to do it without having to run to the store and buy these $30, $40, trendy things that they sell in the store that typically have harsh chemicals and stuff in it. Sorry if it seemed like I lost distraction. When I use a phone to record, it never fails. That's when people want to call. always, always, always. I don't know why, but you know, it is one of them things, guys. But those are just a few little tips I would give. Now, if you have chickens or you have quail, there's a lot of things that you need to make sure that you do to keep those guys healthy. With quail, I don't put them on the ground because it can cause intestinal parasites, worms, and things like that. Now, with chickens, they're out, they're moving around in the coop, so that's something you got to watch for in their stool. Make sure that they don't have parasites. Make sure that they're on no, you know, looks like little eggs and stuff. They'll look like little bitty tiny seeds. That's just basically like with any kind of animal. If it's outside a lot eating off the ground and stuff, they could get worms potentially. So keep an eye on that. Then there's a lot of really good natural remedies and stuff that you can look at. I personally, I think it's better to just use a dewormer if you get in that type of scenario. I've not had that issue yet, but you know, that's just one of them things where you can try stuff at home. Typically, when it comes to that, you're going to have to get some kind of a dewormer to deal with that. That's been my experience with any dogs that I've ever had. If they get worms, you got to go to the store. You got to go to a vet or something and get a dewormer that works. Now, I do like to keep cord on hand for my birds. If I ever see where my birds look like maybe they're getting kind of sluggish and stuff, you want to make sure that you add a teaspoon of that to a gallon of water, and that's going to bolster their immune system and stuff. And it does not hurt to do every few months to just add a little bit of that in there. And that is not like vaccinating chickens and stuff. It's not going to affect them. It's not going to affect you or their eggs in any way. So some really good tips to keep some of that stuff on hand, man. If it comes down to it, choosing between quail and chicken, I can tell you that most of your neighborhoods are not even going to realize you have quail. Chickens, on the other hand, they have a tendency to stink. Yes, you keep the coops and the runs and things cleared out. If you're like me and you want to be able to breed them, then you need a rooster. And most towns and most subdivisions stuff, they do not want you having a rooster anywhere near. Most of them don't even want you to have chickens. So that's something you're going to have to look into for your area. But I hope everyone's been having a wonderful day. I am going to hop off here. I got more work to do out in the garden. Just kind of opening plants up stuff. We've been harvesting a lot of tomatoes off and kind of paying attention to what those plants are doing. I'm going to do something a little different with the next tomato plants and build a little bit better type of a system for those to actually be up, because ran into some high winds and we have a lot of twisted branches and stuff. They're still growing. They heal themselves. And if you add that milk stuff to the ground, what that's going to do, if you mix that milk in with water, it's going to give that plant what it needs to not only be able to rebuild it, it's going to make it stronger where you shouldn't have those issues in the future. But anytime you get a plant that's running, 7 foot tall, you get those high winds in with a thunderstorm, you're going to have damage. The best thing you can do, just let it do what it's doing. Make sure you don't have branches laying on the ground or you will get mildew. You can even pick up blight if your branches are touching the ground. So make sure that you are proactive. Keep things up off of the ground if you can. If you have, melon plants and stuff, then yeah, they run on the ground. It is what it is. But certain types of plants need certain types of care, is I guess what my point is. Everyone have a wonderful day.